Because of a cone whore rabbit, a damned rabbit, a rotten rabbit, contextually appropriate negative term, I'm 10 yuan in debt, and I've been executed repeatedly. To pay off my debt, I chose the most lucrative profession, pharmacist. Originally, I was playing a game about reaching the pinnacle of power. Players could freely choose their professions. Or rather, I chose pharmacist because being poisoned to death felt too frustrating. But as I continued healing, I gradually discovered that selling medicine could bring me a considerable income. This brought great satisfaction to my Taurus heart. Everyone in the game could compete for the throne. I thought money would make things easier, but the royal family's scheming and infighting were far more complicated. So, I was executed again and again. Finally, I couldn't stand this game anymore. I spent so much time and money, but all it brought me was repeated death. Just as I was about to take off my VR headset, something seemed to flash across the screen. At first, I thought something was wrong with my eyes. Suddenly, a new message appeared in the announcements. I immediately clicked on it, afraid of missing important information. Unexpectedly, a little red rabbit appeared. At that time, I didn't know it was a trickster rabbit, a scammer rabbit, contextually appropriate negative term. This was an unprecedented notification method, and there was a countdown timer on its neck. As the con artist rabbit, contextually appropriate negative term, unfurled the scroll in its hands, I saw the event details. For just 1 billion, I could meet the in-game characters. It was discounted by 10 million, and the offer was only valid for 1 minute. I couldn't help but laugh. This wasn't 1 billion in-game currency. Only a fool would pay. Even if it were game currency, I didn't have that much. This junk message, let it go trick someone else. Just as I was about to click decline, I froze. It showed that the payment had been automatically accepted and processed. Automatic loan. I quickly tried to get refund. The swindler rabbit, contextually appropriate negative term, gave a wicked smile and told me that special items were non-refundable. Before I could process it, void fragments began to appear around me. In an instant, a white light sucked me in. In the haze, I seemed to be in an office. I felt exhausted, as if lying on the floor. I looked up and saw the familiar office. It was the game's visuals. At the same time, a bill appeared before me. My face turned grim. Suddenly, it displayed that I had obtained a new title, Deadbeat. After transmigrating, such a cute little fairy like me had to bear the stigma of deadbeat. I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. In my anger, I saw that scheming rabbit, contextually appropriate negative term, again. I had to find him and demand an explanation. I transmigrated into the game world with the system. The system's lowest rating was D rank, but it gave me an S, which was lower than D. And as a pharmacist in my previous life, I should have inherited the Sas's family's pharmaceutical rank. But the system sealed it, making me an imperial citizen. I had just woken up after transmigrating when I heard someone cursing, "Useless thing." And at that moment, the system informed me of my 10-unit unspecified, likely billion debt, and gave me the title of Deadbeat. I couldn't help but feel exasperated. Unexpectedly, the cursing girl became excited, thinking I had gone mad. I couldn't help but look at her. A girl in a green dress named Alexandra. But at that moment, I was more concerned about the system, as it was my only way back. Seeing that I ignored her, Alexandra became even angrier. She slapped me again, and then started kicking and punching me. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. It was all the royal family's fault, those impoverished. I couldn't help but yell at her, but it only lasted for a second. Then she started trying to appease me again. Suddenly, she took out a small leather whip, threatening to whip me to death. I was utterly shocked. Was this something a child under 10 years old should be doing? A wave of dizziness washed over me, and my memories began to merge with the previous memories of this body. As the memories merged, fragments of the past flooded my mind. They were mistakes I couldn't bear to look back on, and my head throbbed with increasing intensity. I was Charisse. In the game, I was royalty, a god among players. Yet, I've been transported to a time before his rise to power. It was precisely these unbearable experiences that shaped him into the legend he became. Even though I failed countless times in the game, this time, I couldn't allow my mission to end. According to my previous memories, I should escape from this demonic girl's clutches. But occupying someone else's body felt wrong, filling me with guilt. Seeing my resistance, the demonic girl, Alexandra, became even more enraged. She roughly grabbed my hair in her hand. She viciously reminded me that a servant is always a servant. Suddenly, her her grip loosened, almost as if she were gently stroking my hair. I foolishly thought she'd had a change of heart, but it was only the calm before the storm. She delivered a resounding slap to my face. The blow left me reeling, unable to think. I turned and ran. Alexandra, the demonic girl, hurled insults after me, cursing my very existence. Only a fool would stay and die, I thought to myself. Seeing the countless doors within the palace, a spark of hope ignited within me. With so many exits, I could easily slip away, and that demonic girl would never find me. Then, I spotted the small shop that had tricked me into coming here. Remembering my ordeal, a wave of fury washed over me. I chased after him, but after he entered one of the doors, I followed, only to find him gone. With a frustrated roar, I burst into tears. Time slowly ticked by. Looking to distract myself, I found a mirror. Seeing how adorable I was, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I was so beautiful. A little mistreatment was to be expected. I was the protagonist of the game, after all. With renewed confidence, I opened the system interface once more. The ancestral quest filled the screen. I had to repay a debt of 10 billion. I had to survive in this palace and become the emperor. There was a third objective, but it remained locked. I was instantly overwhelmed. This was too difficult. There were 14 other contenders for the throne, and if I failed the quest, I would be executed. I didn't even have time to mourn the demonic girl's newfound freedom. The system suddenly issued a new task, forcing me to retaliate against her. If I didn't, I would be killed. I had transmigrated into the body of an imperial princess. I thought I would be a person of power and prestige, second only to the emperor. Instead, I was a neglected mute, and just after my arrival, a servant had punched me in the face. I was being bullied by this girl in a green dress. As I was thinking about how to escape Alexandra's grasp, she grabbed my hair again. I couldn't stand this childish girl any longer. I abruptly stood and slammed into her. The feeling of revenge was momentarily satisfying, but my head throbbed with pain. Why had it become so quiet? I turned to look at her. She was bleeding. Looking at the blood dripping onto her hand, she seemed stunned. Then came her retaliation. How could a delicate flower like her, raised in a greenhouse, endure such an injury? Just then, the damned system issued another task. It wanted me to stop her bleeding. And the reward? A measly $10. I was billions in debt. What a stingy system. Even now, it wouldn't let up. Just you wait. Ignoring her, I took out a piece of paper and stuffed it into her nose to stop the bleeding. Thinking about her cruelty, I managed a strained smile. Her face remained dark. Just then, a woman entered. She asked with concern, "Your Highness, are you all right?" I instantly felt a surge of hope. She must be here to help me. I rushed towards her, but my hopes were dashed. Instead of comforting me, she fussed over the tyrannical Alexandra, leaving me completely ignored. I felt utterly alone. Then I heard my boyfriend's concerned voice. "It couldn't be that mute idiot, could it? Did she bully you?" He leaned towards me as he spoke, but I was truly innocent. I was clearly the one being bullied. He also noticed I could speak. Just as I felt a flicker of relief that he cared, he added, with a sigh, "The most important thing is you actually bullied Prince Alexander." Then he proceeded to lecture me, fretting about weather-eyed, scarred Alexander's face. Didn't he care about me at all? Alexander waved a dismissive hand at the maid, but he wasn't one to let things go. Turning to face me, a magic circle appeared beneath his feet, and energy began to swirl around his temples. This was the power unique to the royal family, granted by their pact with the Golden Holy Alliance. This power was passed down through generations, but I knew the royals weren't permitted to use magic so casually. Watching Alexander's darkening expression, I could only pray. Just then, the system unlocked a new feature, the monolith of truth. To my shock, it revealed I was ranked even lower than the lowest D rank, and my status as the heir to the Blake Alexis pharmaceutical house was revoked, branding me as a mere commoner. At the same time, Alexander gathered a ball of dark energy in his hand, preparing to hurl it at me. Seeing the maid rush towards me, I thought she was coming to save me, but after grabbing me, she backhanded me hard and then restrained me. I've been naive again. Seeing me captured, Alexander extended his hand, expecting me to kneel and kiss it, a gesture of utter humiliation. Faced with such a predicament, I didn't hesitate. I lunged at his leg and bit it. I was instantly knocked to the ground. He gathered more magic, ready to strike again. Then a rich, masculine voice boomed out. I knew my savior had arrived. At the tender age of 6, I had been betrayed by my nanny. She had conspired with Princess Alexandra to have me brutally beaten. Now, I sat paralyzed on the floor. Just as despair threatened to consume me, a voice rang out. Who dares unleash such killing intent within the palace walls? A red-haired man strode into the room. It was the imperial prince himself. He glared at Alexandra with a thunderous expression. Alexandra, by now, was trembling with fear. Clutching her skirt tightly, she stammered, "I'm sorry." The red-haired man ignored her apology. He continued to reprimand her for attacking someone so much younger than herself. The nanny, unwilling to see Alexandra humiliated, interrupted the prince and began to accuse me. The prince merely glared at the nanny, who promptly dropped to her knees and begged forgiveness. He turned his gaze to me, looking utterly pathetic, and couldn't help but murmur about how adorable I was. I tentatively reached out to him. He responded, taking my hand. His handsome features sent a flutter through me. He suddenly asked, "Aren't you afraid of me?" I startled, remembering I was, after all, a transmigrator. I quickly feigned a look of fear. He remained impassive, as if he'd seen right through me. Seeing I wasn't truly afraid, he seemed intrigued. His continued gaze made me blush. He really was quite handsome. Just then, the system panel reappeared, displaying this man's information. To my surprise, it indicated that such a handsome man was unavailable. The system then informed me that, as a pharmacist, my future system tasks would be medicine-related. Seeing my dazed expression, he instructed his attendants to take me for a checkup. But this was a perfect opportunity to cling to a powerful figure. Ignoring his aid, I rushed towards the prince and clung to him tightly. Alexandra and the others simply stood there, frozen in place. They thought the cold-hearted prince would surely lash out at me. But I wasn't about to be caught off guard. I cried out, "Daddy, don't leave me." His heart softened a little, but he still tried to refuse me. Thankfully, his aide spoke up on my behalf. At this point, I had to resort to my ultimate move. I nibbled on my hand, tears welling in my eyes, keeping my head down without saying another word. Inwardly, I was perfectly calm. I introduced myself to him and assured him I was obedient. Then I told him I knew he wasn't feeling well and that I could help him. He seemed unconvinced. Driven by the thought of the 1,000 prize, I held out my hand again. To my surprise, he noticed the injury on it immediately. He started to fuss over me. I quickly hid my hand behind my back. I pretended not to care, knowing adults always favor well-behaved children. The brighter my smile, the more his heart would ache for me. Just as I'd planned, he scooped me up in his arms. He declared that from now on, he would be my father. Nestled in his embrace, this was the closest I'd ever been to a man, and I couldn't help but let my thoughts wander. Instead of leaving immediately, he called for Alexandra's nanny. The nanny was terrified. My newfound father warned her never to lay a hand on me again. He glanced at Alexandra. Then, still holding me, he punished her. He ordered the nanny who had betrayed me to be taken away and interrogated. Then, he turned and left, still carrying me. At that moment, my system fell dormant. Was this newfound father of mine truly altruistic? Outwardly, I was a revered imperial princess. In reality, I was a mute who could be abused at will, even by the servants. Fortunately, I had been rescued by the imperial prince. After accepting him as my father, I fainted. Had the prince saved me only temporarily, or did he truly want me to stay by his side? I had no way of knowing. The next day, I awoke in a 5-meter-long bed. This, I thought, was the life of royalty. I ran my hand over the luxuriously soft bedding. A maid saw that I was awake and immediately rushed to my side, showering me with attention I had never known. Through her introduction, I learned she was no ordinary servant. She was the eldest daughter of a prominent family within the imperial court, a lineage that stretched back 500 years. Their loyalty to the crown was unparalleled. Knowing I was to be the future empress and in need of allies, I greeted her politely. Seeing my noble status and that I wasn't putting on airs, she seemed to take a liking to me. After carefully dressing and grooming me, she led me to breakfast. On the way, I began to probe. With each carefully worded question, I realized I would likely have the prince's permanent protection. But even so, how could I gain his trust and complete the system's mission? I was surprised by the sheer extravagance of the breakfast laid out before me. As expected, the prince joined us for the meal. Just as I was about to start eating, the mission panel reappeared. It urged me to heal the prince's stomach ailment quickly. I looked at him, the thought of the reward making my eyes gleam. But the treatment required pricking my finger with a red-hot needle. I hesitated. Anyone would think I was repaying kindness with cruelty. But if I didn't complete the mission, I would be erased. Regardless, I decided to try after breakfast. Meanwhile, the prince began inquiring about my eating habits. In my past life, I had been a strong advocate for a balanced diet. I certainly wasn't a picky eater. I quickly denied any such tendencies. The prince seemed surprised that a 4-year-old wasn't picky. He looked at me with even greater curiosity. The steak and fried eggs before me looked delicious, and my appetite surged. There was a golden roast chicken right in front of me. But just as I reached for it, a bowl of mung bean soup was placed in my hands. Then they gave me a plate of fried cabbage, telling me that since I wasn't a picky eater, these were good for me. I was speechless. I'm not picky, just not a vegetarian. A feast laid out before me, and I'm stuck with vegetables. How could I possibly enjoy this? Thankfully, my father, the imperial prince, gave me permission to continue eating. After the meal, it was time for me to treat his ailment. Watching his back, I gathered my courage and decided to speak with him. I ran towards him, taking his large hand in both of mine. With a sincere expression, I said, "There's something I'd like to ask you. I want to treat your stomach ache." Before he could answer, his aide asked, "How did you know His Highness has a stomach ache?" This question only made my precarious situation worse. How was I supposed to successfully treat him and complete the mission? Looking at the man who had saved me from danger, I suggested using a hot, fire-forged silver needle inserted directly into his finger to make him experience the interconnectedness of the 10 fingers and the body's pain. Everyone was startled by my proposal. The prince's aide suspected I was trying to harm him. I quickly explained that this was to alleviate the prince's stomach discomfort. The aide still seemed doubtful of my methods. The maids and other servants wore expressions of disbelief. Then the aide suddenly said, "How did you know His Highness has stomach discomfort?" Panicked, I blurted out a random answer, mentioning my father's various expressions during mealtimes. Just as they were starting to believe me, that blasted aide, as if determined to oppose me, asked again, "Then how did you learn these methods?" Thinking fast, I drew upon the game's lore and used the revered golden dragon to explain. "A golden holy dragon taught me in a dream," I declared. "Every day, the holy dragon graciously imparts knowledge to me." I then gave a few examples of herbal remedies. Watching me speak so confidently, they seemed to drop their suspicions. However, the aide still expressed concern for the prince's health. My father, Bullied Qinwang, showed his princely resolve. He scoffed. "She's only 4 years old. What harm could she possibly do?" He then ordered someone to prepare the items I had requested. The servant obeyed the prince's command. Meanwhile, Sophia was about to go and help. I quickly stopped her and quietly told her what needed to be prepared. Once everything was ready, the prince, who had been so confident earlier, now seemed a little nervous. His voice even trembled slightly. I quickly acted coquettishly, asking, "Daddy, should I be gentle?" Then I put on what I considered to be a cute expression, hoping he wouldn't be able to refuse. I couldn't help but think about how I had played this game for 8 years, and the White Knight Palace, ruled by the prince, was the southernmost palace. And now here I was living within it. I felt a surge of gratitude, but the most crucial areas were still inaccessible to me. Just then, he abruptly interrupted my thoughts, declaring, "I'm not your father," in an attempt to avoid the treatment. Fortunately, just then, Sophia arrived with the vinegar I needed. She asked with concern, "Are you really going to prick it under his fingernail?" I assured her confidently. I carefully wrapped a cloth around my father's finger. Seeing my serious yet adorable demeanor, the aide stifled a laugh. After heating the needle, I held his large hand and inserted it directly into the acupoint. Mission accomplished, and with it came a new mission. The prince's stomach ailment, which even the royal physicians couldn't cure, had been resolved by me, a 4-year-old girl, with a single needle. As soon as I finished, the system notified me of the gold coins I had earned. The prince quickly expressed his approval on my medical skills. He looked at his thumb with some puzzlement. Then he asked, "How did you do that?" I couldn't help but feel bewildered. This was a healing technique even commoners knew. At this moment, the aide standing beside us showered me with praise. A large hand reached out. He affectionately ruffled my hair. Faced with such a display of favoritism, I naturally basked in the attention. Just then, the aide explained why the imperial physicians couldn't cure him. It turned out that the imperial prince was so imposing, no one dared to treat him. No one expected me to be so bold. And then a new mission appeared. Apparently, treating his ailment had only been 50% of the task. The remaining 50% required a medicinal potion for a complete cure. Initially, I felt a bit disgruntled by this new mission, but when I saw the reward, another 1,000 gold coins, I was instantly motivated. However, the medicinal potion required herbs from the White Knight Palace as ingredients. This wouldn't be easy. Those herbs represented the very heart of the White Knight Palace. And based on my past life's experience, the White Knight Palace, under the Imperial Prince's guard, had been impenetrable. I had tried various methods to enter, but all had failed. How could I gain the Imperial Prince's trust? Gazing at my reflection in the cup, I fell into deep thought. I yearned for this life, loved and cherished, but I knew it was all a facade. Hesitantly, I called out, "Father." He seemed to notice my apprehension, but he mistook it for fear of Alexandra's ambitions. He simply told me that she had been locked up. I denied that was the reason, becoming slightly reserved. Lowering my head in thought for a moment, I quickly changed the subject. Looking up, I asked him, "Do you truly see me as your daughter?" He looked at my fidgeting feet and gave me an affirmative answer. Looking at his impassive expression, I felt helpless, but I had nowhere else to go. And besides me, there were many others with a claim to the throne. If I wanted to survive here, I had to get closer to the Imperial Prince. The Imperial Prince pondered for a moment, thinking to himself that I was a good girl. Then he turned to me and said, "Go and play." I suddenly asked, "Don't I need to study?" He truly was a good father. He told me I didn't have to study if I didn't want to. I could play all day today and study tomorrow if I wished. After he left, I began to wander through the gardens, silently enjoying my first moment of leisure since arriving in this world. Just then, on the other side of the White Knight Palace, the new king began searching through a large number of documents. He idly chatted as he worked, but at that moment, I had no idea that I was the only one who could break the magic armor curse. And that was the main reason the imperial physicians couldn't heal him. To everyone's surprise, this workaholic actually thought of me while he worked. Even he himself didn't notice the unconscious upturn of his lips. Meanwhile, a file about me was unearthed by many, including the imperial prince. I, a desolate royal shunned by the nobility, was now under the protection of the empire's coldest imperial prince, all because of a single encounter we'd shared. This prompted the powerful figures within the palace to scramble for my file. In their eyes, the imperial prince's protection meant one of two things. Either the prince, newly returned to the capital, was acting on a whim, or he was aiming to consolidate his power. But even so, it was enough to make my status significant in their eyes. However, those who knew the imperial prince well understood there was another reason. I resembled the woman who had once driven him to madness, and for whom he had willingly endured the torment of the underwater hell for years. I was the only one besides her who dared to approach him, but this was only known to his close confidants. In truth, the imperial prince and I had met once before, a meeting I had long since forgotten. At this moment, the imperial prince brought out my records. In the former empire, there were two heirs to the throne. Although they appeared equal, undercurrents of tension flowed beneath the surface. And while I am a descendant of one of them, only my mother's information is available. Nothing is known about my father. This inevitably caused even greater concern for the officials reviewing my file. Someone with no apparent background had somehow gained the protection of the first imperial prince. Meanwhile, the imperial prince, through interrogating my nanny, learned that due to my unclear speech, everyone had mistaken me for a simpleton. I suffered almost constant humiliation. Even my prosthetic hands were swapped out for fakes. Hearing this, the imperial prince recalled our first meeting. Back then, just like now, I showed no hesitation towards him and immediately wanted to play in the dirt with him. He had offered me the world's most precious gem, the heart of devotion, trying to distract me and get rid of me. But I paid it no mind, insistent on playing with him. He reminisced, listening to the account of my painful experiences. He then ordered new prosthetic hands for me. The soft expression on his face vanished, replaced by his usual stern, almost indifferent demeanor. He declared that the fourth floor of the White Knight Palace would be open to me. Instead of using a flying message to inform Sophia, who was playing with me, he spoke directly. Upon hearing the news, Sophia, though outwardly calm, was inwardly shaken to her core. I was playing in the garden. As I rested, I drifted into a daydream. My thoughts wandered from His Imperial Highness to myself as Empress possessing endless riches. Lost in my reverie, Sophia approached, startling me. I was terrified she would think me mad. Learning I could enter the fourth floor shocked me. I knew it was the heart of the White Knight Palace, the place I longed to access. If I could get inside, I had a good chance of obtaining the herbs needed for my mission. What I didn't know was that while the Imperial Prince was fond of me, he remained wary due to my uncertain origins. Furthermore, the fourth floor was a space the prince himself had created. Every move I made would be under his scrutiny. I had no idea what I would face. This man had invited me into his treasury simply because I had gifted him a hair tie. It held untold riches, yet I had chosen a poisonous herb. Before I entered, Sophia was explaining the general situation of the White Knight Palace's fourth floor. The rise and fall of the White Knight Palace, in its original design, it only had 3 floors. The legendary fourth floor didn't actually exist. However, due to the prince's immense power, he forcibly used his own magic to create a dimensional space. From then on, the White Knight Palace had a 4th floor. It was said that within the 4th floor, there were countless trophies of war, including an immeasurable amount of jewels. It wasn't just about obtaining these treasures. Even just glimpsing inside was considered the highest honor of a lifetime. As Sophia spoke, a look of longing crossed her face. It made me wonder if her yearning was for the treasury or for the Imperial Prince himself. Seeing her desire, I asked, "Aren't you going?" and invited her to come with me. Meanwhile, in the Imperial Prince's office, he and his aide were still studying me. Although I was only 4 years old, all royals, upon reaching the age of 11, were required to participate in the struggle for the throne. The aide, well aware of the inherent dangers, suggested taking me out of the palace to avoid the future turmoil. The Imperial Prince, after a moment of contemplation, rejected the idea. For princes who left the palace to lull their rivals into a false sense of security, the dangers outside were just as perilous. Then the aide brought out the detector that had been secretly placed in my room. It could detect the magical power of every member of the royal family. My magic power was no different from an ordinary person's. This meant I was the weakest being in the line of succession. The aide couldn't help but frown. But when he saw the unwavering conviction on the Imperial Prince's face, he suddenly thought of something and became involuntarily tense. The usually composed aide began to panic. Even his speech became stammering. "Why, Your Highness, are you serious?" The Imperial Prince didn't deny anything. Instead, he replied, "Is there a law against it?" The aide wanted to say something more, but the Imperial Prince cut him off. "Just do as I say. Besides," he continued, "a royal living in the Imperial Prince's residence is already unconventional. But how difficult this must be for her. Countless people in this palace believe I have no future. My path is destined to have few supporters, and my mother suffers under a cloud of scandal. This undoubtedly makes everyone think I'm hopeless." But looking at the Imperial Prince's confident face, the aide silently retreated. The Imperial Prince, holding the hair tie I had given him, fell into deep thought. He contemplated every potential enemy I might face. At the same time, my plight stirred a protective instinct within him. He silently tightened his grip on the hair tie. And so my journey as a royal truly began. I, once considered a fool by everyone, was suddenly recognized as the reincarnation of the Holy Dragon. The Imperial Prince kept listing my various peculiarities. Despite never having received any formal education, I somehow possessed medical knowledge. As he spoke, he suddenly mentioned the matter of me being the Holy Dragon's reincarnation to the aide. The aide hastily inquired, "Are you certain, Your Highness?" The Imperial Prince replied directly, "Whether she is or isn't is unimportant. What matters is that we say she is, and her various traits can be interpreted as those of the Holy Dragon reborn. And with such a status, the odds of winning the future struggle for the throne will greatly increase." With that, he ordered the fabrication of a narrative of my being the Holy Dragon's reincarnation. The Imperial Prince hadn't forgotten Alexandra, who had bullied me before. He made her write self-criticisms every day, grinding the once arrogant royal's pride into the dust. Coupled with repeated intimidation and psychological manipulation, Alexandra had long since lost her ambition. Instead, fear had turned her into a shell of her former self. They hadn't planned to tell me any of this, intending to pave the way for me as much as possible first. Meanwhile, I was searching for umebashi plums, the fruit they considered poisonous, but I could use them to create a remedy for the imperial prince's stomach ailment. When I asked to enter the warehouse where the umebashi were stored, the imperial prince agreed without hesitation. The imperial prince also began preparing the paperwork for my adoption and instructed the aide to find numerous parenting books. However, I didn't yet know that my soon-to-be father was, apparently, obsessed with virgins. After careful processing, I finally finished pickling the umebashi. After filtering out the plums, I had a delicious drink. After carefully dressing myself, I took the drink to my father. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see him. I only learned from the aide that the imperial prince had gone to the divine emperor's palace. I, once a scorned orphan, finally had a father who doted on me. But the very next day, when I brought him a gift, he refused to see me. Seeing how upset I was, the aide quickly explained the imperial prince was up all night. He worked straight through until 4 a.m. and then went to train the troops. Knowing he also had a stomach ailment, my heart ached for him. I immediately begged the aide to tell me the location of the training grounds. Knowing my standing with the imperial prince, he didn't hesitate to tell me where the training grounds were. This was the most rigorous military force in the entire empire. And into this normally highly disciplined army, a small child suddenly burst, running and shouting, "Daddy!" This naturally caught everyone's attention. Looking at their bewildered expressions, I ignored them and asked where the imperial prince was. The usually gruff guard, surprisingly gentle, pointed me in the right direction. A stern voice boomed across the training grounds. "What are you all doing instead of training?" Then he saw me. "Darling," he said, "this is dangerous. What are you doing here?" Ignoring the murmuring soldiers, I rushed forward and threw my arms around him. "Papa, you're so mean to them." I pouted. He didn't deny it, only softly replied, "I'll be more mindful in the future." The soldiers exchanged bewildered glances. When had they ever witnessed such tenderness from the imperial prince? But as they caught my sweet smile, they seemed to be infected by my cheer. Cuteness truly is a universal language. I then complained to the imperial prince about him leaving without telling me, especially since I had prepared a gift for him. The mention of a gift piqued his interest. After all, he rarely experienced such care. With a snap of my fingers, Sophia appeared, pushing forward a cart laden with chilled plum juice I had made. Witnessing this royal treatment, the soldiers erupted in clamor. A single look from the imperial prince silenced them. Just as he was about to speak, I cut him off. "What's wrong?" He said nothing was amiss, but when I wasn't looking, he shot the soldiers a warning glare. Seeing the soldiers' crestfallen faces, I quickly instructed Sophia to attend to the imperial prince while I personally distributed the refreshing drinks. The soldiers were, of course, overwhelmed. Who among them had ever tasted such exquisite plum juice? Who among them had been served by a royal? To my surprise, the imperial prince, seeing me attending to others, became visibly jealous. When I returned to his side, he feigned indifference. Then I noticed him reaching for more ice. I immediately scolded him, pointing out his sensitive stomach, yet his insistence on consuming cold drinks. Meanwhile, the soldiers, energized, flocked around me, pledging their loyalty. The imperial prince couldn't help but remark that they seemed to have forgotten their own army. However, he was clearly pleased to see me getting along so well with his men. He then instructed Sophia to escort me back. I reached out and caught his arm, leaning in to whisper something in his ear. After I left, he mumbled my words to himself. "Next time you can call me Little Cherry." The soldiers, burning with curiosity, began to ask questions. A sharp clang of his sword cut through the air. The imperial prince's voice turned icy. "I see you're all enjoying your rest. Double the training regime." The soldiers' faces paled. Upon returning, I came face to face with the portrait of the woman who had once driven the imperial prince to the brink of madness. Although of royal blood, I was considered a simpleton and subjected to widespread scorn. But ever since I had claimed the imperial prince as my father, I had first captured the hearts of the soldiers with my charm, and then began to live a life of unimaginable luxury. Finally, a white cat disrupted the tranquility. After leaving the training grounds, Sophia led me towards the legendary fourth floor of the White Knight Palace. The portrait before me, bearing a striking resemblance to myself, was of my mother, Juliana. Simply by pushing the portrait aside, one could gain access to the fourth floor, a treasure trove of spoils of war, priceless jewels, weapons of unimaginable power, all acquired by the imperial prince over years of conquest. My gaze was drawn to a magnificent crown, forged from gold, studded with glittering gems, and imbued with magical properties. A single glance, and I was captivated. Then I noticed a sparkling, crystalline blue gemstone necklace. I put them on and asked Sophia if I could keep them. To my surprise, they were a gift the imperial prince had intended for someone else, someone who would never return. Despite this, the imperial prince gave them to me. This, however, was just the beginning of my luxurious life. It began the very next day. The moment I woke up, I was showered with attention. Not only were all my clothes new, but they were also magically woven. They seemed almost shy, seeing me so delighted. Suddenly, I received a new task. Ladies, step aside. Please administer treatment immediately. Apparently, any slight ailment among the palace staff required my attention. While I was playing with them, they noticed the scars on my hands. I couldn't help but recall the times Alexandra had bullied me. They were shocked, then quickly brought out ointment to treat my wounds. Just as I was getting used to this life, Sophia informed me that my lessons would begin. First up was the royal family tree. This was precisely what I wanted to learn. As Sophia explained, I gradually realized this wasn't just a lesson for me. It was the imperial prince's way of preparing me for the struggle for the throne. This suited me perfectly. Looking at the lowest branch, where my name was written, I made up my mind. I would see that name at the very top. Just then, a white cat suddenly appeared. Sophia seemed completely oblivious to its presence. The white cat suddenly spoke. Don't panic. You're not dreaming. After I transmigrated, I was the scorned imperial princess, finally adopted by the imperial prince and given respect. But today he wanted me to leave his White Knight Palace. While I was still in lessons, just before my departure, a white cat appeared. The white cat gave me a strange smile. Then it said, "You're not dreaming." I was startled, but when I looked at Sophia, her expression hadn't changed. She seemed to be completely unaware of the cat. Seeing the change in my face, she assumed I was tired from studying and kindly asked if I needed a break. Not wanting to worry her, I told her I could continue. After all, I had once been known as a simpleton. I didn't want their newly changed opinion of me to revert. Seeing my expression improve, she continued the lesson. She took out a crystal-like object. A voice announced, "Facial recognition complete." I realized it was something like a projector for the lesson. As she lectured on the history of the royal family, it aligned with the game lore I knew from before I transmigrated. It was then that the realization hit me. I was a transmigrator. These past few days had allowed me to fully inhabit this body. My original memories seemed to be fading. The thought filled me with dread. I knew I had to act quickly, but here, I had found people who genuinely cared for me. Even though I knew this was a game world, my feelings for them were real. What would happen to them if I left? For a moment, I considered staying. Just then, the system window reappeared. For points could buy the ability to read minds. Before I could examine the details, Sophia interrupted me again. "Are you tired? Perhaps we should end the lesson for today." Suddenly, I felt a presence watching me. I turned to see the imperial prince, dressed impeccably in a suit. Noticing my gaze, he said, "You were quite engrossed in your studies. So much so, you didn't even notice me arrive." Suddenly, the strange white cat moved. As I replied to the imperial prince, the cat walked towards me. With a swift leap, it landed on the imperial prince's shoulder. I couldn't help but wonder if this strange white cat belonged to him. "Come with me," a deep voice interrupted my thoughts. The imperial prince said with a touch of exasperation, "You haven't shown a shred of your supposed talent." And then I saw the luggage piled up over there. Was he asking me to leave? My face fell. I rushed to him and cried, "Papa!" But he only said, "Sending you away might be a bit of shock, but perhaps it's for the best." My heart plummeted. My mind raced. Was he just looking for an excuse to get rid of me? I searched his expression, trying to decipher his true intentions. But he was an imperial prince. His thoughts were an impenetrable fortress. I could only silently trail behind him. Suddenly, I remembered the system. Looking at his back, I quickly clicked confirm purchase. I knew my chance had come. The father who had showered me with affection just yesterday seemed ready to throw me out the very next day, all because I had studied diligently. But then, during my lessons, I received a system notification. Perhaps there was still a chance to salvage the situation. Unfortunately, it wasn't the ability to directly read minds. Instead, it offered plot hints. And these hints, normally worth 1,000, were only offered at a 1% discount. I couldn't help but think the system was a ripoff. Still, I bought them. I didn't want to be kicked out after all, but after purchasing, I discovered there were only 10 hints. I would have to save them for crucial moments. To my surprise, the Imperial Prince led me to a meticulously decorated room, filled with all sorts of gifts. I stared, astonished. "These are all for you," he said, confirming my suspicions. I had thought he was just teasing me earlier. I hadn't realized the Imperial Prince had gone through so much trouble to have this prepared for me. Apparently, someone had asked him if it might be too overwhelming for such a young child. Well, overwhelmed I was. Just then, I received another system notification. The importance of those 10 hints was randomized. That swindler. I raged internally. Suddenly, that blasted rabbit appeared again, holding a hammer. Without a word, it whacked me on the head. I crumpled to the floor. The Imperial Prince looked concerned. Thinking fast, I blurted out, "It's the Holy Dragon's way of showing gratitude." I wasn't sure if he believed me. Looking around the room he had so carefully prepared, I felt a surge of warmth. The sadness I had felt from my impulsive, misguided purchase melted away. I eagerly reached for an exquisitely wrapped gift box and tore it open. Inside were neatly arranged pictures. I formally thanked him. He replied with a casual, "You're welcome." But then I looked at the room's decorations. They were all art pieces. Was this really something a child like me could appreciate? I flopped onto the floor again, feigning another bout of holy dragon-induced gratitude, leaving him bewildered. He gently ruffled my hair and then sat down to read, leaving me to my own devices. I quietly opened the system hints. I wanted to see what could possibly be worth 1,000. A child starved for affection, finally experiencing what it felt like to have a father. I opened the messages I had purchased. The first one informed me that a treasure chest, capable of holding only the most wondrous artifacts, cost 50 million. But apparently, I could bring these artifacts out of the game world. I clicked on the next message. My blood ran cold. It bluntly stated that if I didn't repay my debts soon, there would be consequences. I scrolled through the rest of the messages, but none of them seemed particularly useful. I decided to look at them later. As I pondered how to complete my mission, the Imperial Prince suddenly spoke. "You've been drawing for so long," he said. "Why is the paper still blank?" Then he mentioned that if I didn't like drawing, I could do something else. I quickly denied it. I made the excuse that father was too handsome, and I was afraid I'd draw him poorly. He turned to leave, comforting me that a work of art isn't created in a single attempt. I breathed a sigh of relief. I was worried he'd ask why I hadn't started drawing yet. Just then, the Imperial Prince called me over to him. He started talking about his twin sons. I couldn't help but worry whether they would dislike me suddenly appearing in their lives. He just affectionately ruffled my hair and said that if they were childish enough to act that way, he would take care of it for me. Seeing him so thoughtful, I felt a little overwhelmed. I thought about these past few days, how he'd played with me and celebrated my adoption, how joyful life had become. I couldn't help but feel touched, because before I transmigrated, my father had passed away when I was very young. My memories of paternal love were hazy. Now, sitting in the Imperial Prince's lap, I couldn't help but recall those bygone days. He suddenly asked me what my father was like. Thinking of all the gifts he'd given me, I hesitated for a moment. Then I told him that a father was someone who would always stand by my side, no matter what. I remembered our first meeting long ago when I was crying alone. It was he who reached out a large, warm hand to comfort me. Just then, he pulled out my old hair ribbon. He said, "Everything you do is right. If anyone disagrees," he continued, "I'll make them disappear." Then he tied my hair with the ribbon. In that moment, I truly didn't want to go back to my old world. The herbs I'd casually picked were apparently worth a mountain of gold. Before that, I was nestled in father's arms, sleeping. An attendant came in to report on some work, only to be scolded by father for fear of waking me. He said he was reading a parenting book, a thoughtful expression on his face. Then he realized it was actually a novel. Father quickly said he'd deal with it later, trying to hide his embarrassment. Suddenly, he noticed I was awake, though still a bit drowsy. To maintain his dignified image in my eyes, he quickly started discussing work with the attendant. But the attendant remarked on how fortunate I was, as father had never been so gentle with anyone. Father, however, maintained his serious demeanor and then left with the attendant to attend to his duties. The moment the imperial prince left, his expression changed completely. It turned out the attendant was reporting on the progress of my adoption. They were preparing for my two older brothers to return and meet me. Elsewhere, Sophia was busy preparing for my adoption party. The imperial prince was plotting something big. Even the attendant had a mischievous grin, because the next morning, everyone would be buzzing about the announcement. It declared that I would be adopted by the imperial prince. However, almost everyone considered me, the imperial princess, to be an idiot. But thanks to the imperial prince's machinations, once the story of me using poison disguised as medicine spread, along with the tale of me being the imperial princess blessed by the holy dragon, and using Alexandra and my own experiences to showcase my benevolence, my image in the eyes of the public was now. While at this point I was eating, suddenly, fingers sneezed. I wondered who was talking about me behind my back. At that moment, an old man expressed surprise at my presence. He'd never seen royalty come here to pick herbs themselves. He began to tell me about each plant. Through our conversation, I began to suspect that this world didn't have doctors. I also learned that royalty could heal themselves using their own abilities, while commoners, if they left their wounds untreated, then something terrible is sure to happen. And it seems the imperial palace only has simple remedies, or one would need to go to the temple to purchase them. They are considered gifts from the god of love. Because of this, the temple holds an equally high status. I inquired about the price of the medicine. When I heard it was 10,000 gold pieces, I was utterly stunned. The herbs in my hands are worth at least their weight in gold. Even if the gravely ill manage to reach the temple, they still have to wait a whole year. Thinking about the plight of the common people, I knew this was my responsibility as a healer. I was once bullied and looked down upon, and now it's happening again. Just now, I was pondering why medical care wasn't more accessible to the poor. The old man beside me seemed to sense my thoughts. He praised my compassion and gave me an apple. As I savored the apple, I contemplated how I, as the imperial princess, could make healthcare more widespread. Just then, a figure appeared behind me. I noticed him, but before I could get a good look, he called me a hand-eating idiot and said I was arrogant. Seeing I didn't respond, he actually threw a tantrum. Then he arrogantly declared that he was the acknowledged Jian Huang. Faced with such an arrogant, brainless boy, I simply felt he wasn't half as good as the apple in my hand. But why was he allowed inside the imperial prince's White Knight palace? It was best to steer clear of fools like him. Then I heard him bragging about how I, the idiot, ran away from him. I decided I needed to teach him a lesson. In the name of the imperial prince, I would. While he was still rambling on, my sudden appearance startled him. As my anger flared, my eyes subtly shifted to pink, the color unique to the sacred dragon's gaze. He was still yelling, trying to buff himself, but with a single stomp of my foot, combined with my sacred dragon eyes, he hesitated. I thought of Alexandra, of how the imperial prince had rescued me and given me warmth. Now, faced with this situation, just as I was about to unleash my fury, he seemed utterly terrified and instantly transformed into a simple stick figure, vanishing from my sight. My mood soared. I skipped off, eager to tell father everything that had happened. Unbeknownst to me, two individuals had witnessed the entire incident, but I hadn't noticed them at all. This world was truly strange. Just because I possessed healing abilities, even the royal family wanted to kidnap me. After being bullied and leaving just now, I was unaware that two people were secretly observing everything. One of them said he didn't want to interfere. The other expressed his desire to try and kidnap me to cure his grandfather's illness. Red hair doubted my abilities, while yellow hair argued that I was only 4 years old, so even if it didn't work, wouldn't matter. Then red hair seemed to agree with yellow hair, and the two laughed, looking towards the boy I had just scared away. The foolish boy ran, cursing me as he went. "Where do you think you're going?" A voice rang out. The foolish boy trembled in fear. He noticed the imposing aura emanating from the person blocking his path. He knew instinctively this was someone he couldn't afford to offend. If I had been there, I would have recognized the man. He bore a striking resemblance to the imperial prince. Just as the foolish boy tried to flee, yellow hair appeared behind him. He began to inquire about my identity, but the two had no intention of telling him. He seemed to have already anticipated his fate. He immediately knelt down and begged for forgiveness. Faced with his pleas, the two men scoffed. Then, magnanimously, they declared that an apology to me would suffice. But his hand began to move. Then, a scream echoed through the White Knight Palace. At that moment, I was with Father, recounting what had just happened. He was braiding my hair. His movements were practiced and deft, likely because he braided my hair every day. He told me how he usually dealt with these documents. So many documents that they left the staff utterly exhausted. When I said I wanted to stay there with him, the two of them became quite animated, fussing over me. Perhaps I was easier to be around. As I prepared to draw, that talking white cat appeared again. Even now, I still don't know if it was the Imperial Prince's cat. My hands were never idle. In moments, a masterpiece took shape. The Imperial Prince accepted the drawing. His expression shifted. He asked me seriously, "Have you seen this cat before?" In this world, only the owner can see their pet, but I could see other people's. Just now, I had drawn a picture of talking cat. After Father looked at it, he stared at me, astonished. He asked if I could see the cat in the picture. I had never seen him so serious. After hesitating, I gave him an affirmative answer. He fell into deep thought. Then, with another snap of his fingers, the white cat leaped out of the drawing, right before my stunned eyes. It even greeted me. Then Father introduced it as his familiar. He explained that familiars are usually invisible to others. Now I understood. The cat really was the Imperial Prince's cat. I immediately wondered if I could see it because of my close relationship with him. Then the Imperial Prince explained the conditions for seeing a familiar. It required at least half-dragon strength. Furthermore, only powerful members of the Imperial family possessed familiars. But not only did I not have half-dragon strength, I was weaker than even a level 5 weakling. Father poked my forehead. Then, affectionately ruffling my hair, he said that I was an Imperial princess protected by the Holy Dragon, so everything was normal. He then added, almost boastfully, that even his two silly sons had familiars. I couldn't help but wonder if my familiar had abandoned me after I was born, disgusted by my weakness. Then I remembered that troublesome rabbit. It was probably someone's familiar too. A thought suddenly struck me. I hurriedly asked the Imperial Prince what the Emperor's familiar looked like. Unfortunately, he didn't know. I could only pray it wasn't the Emperor's familiar. Otherwise, having offended that rabbit, I would be in deep trouble. Just then, a maid's scream interrupted my thoughts. I saw a maid kneeling on the floor. She had accidentally broken a jar. Although she was panicked, I felt it was just a minor incident. As she cleaned up, I noticed a wound on her hand. I immediately asked her about it, and she explained that she had gotten it while cleaning the candlestick yesterday. Suddenly, I remembered the healing ointment I used for my hands. Just as I was about to fetch it, a large hand stopped me. This world was very strange. Even my kindness could be reprimanded. I had just noticed the maid's injured hand, and I was going to get my hand cream for her, but a large hand stopped me. The Imperial Prince told me that things belonging to the Imperial family couldn't be given to others, especially not things blessed by the temple. The maid also spoke up, trying to dissuade me. The Imperial Prince simply scooped me up into his arms. The maid was searching for something on her person. She then pulled out a tin of hand cream. I noticed it was completely different from what I usually used. It even emitted a foul odor. She explained that it was purchased 10 years ago and made from an extract of a plant called suhua. Hearing this, I cover my mouth in surprise, not only because they didn't seem to consider expiration dates, but also because that flower is essentially a poison. Its side effects are extremely severe. I frowned deeply. I then told the maid, whose name I now knew was Xia, not to use it, but she insisted that the older it was, the better. I felt utterly exasperated. A large hand rested on my shoulder. The Imperial Prince said that the maid should go and rest. Xia, however, expressed her reluctance to leave my side. My father simply said coldly, "Do you want to stay here and break more cups?" Xia had no choice but to slink away. I walked through the palace, feeling dejected. A new task appeared from the system. I needed to create a medicinal ointment and save 92,824 people, including Xia, within 3 months. Furthermore, I had to locate these patients before I could treat them. The reward would be 100 million, but failure meant death. This worry kept me awake all night. Even when I woke up, I was still pondering how to be more efficient. Suddenly, Sophia came to find me. Today was the party for the Imperial Prince's formal adoption of me. The party began with a flourish of trumpets. Sophia, and I made our way to the gathering. We had just reached the Imperial Prince's side when we heard approaching footsteps. Before us appeared the unconventional duo, my two older brothers. They greeted the Imperial Prince. Red hair maintained a cool indifference, while yellow hair seemed full of enthusiasm. I tried my best to appear endearing, hoping to win their affection. Yellow hair strode towards me, but the moment he got close, his expression changed dramatically. Just because I had made plum sauce, my brother became sarcastic. One moment he was greeting me warmly, but as he approached, he gave a sly smile. "Was this all part of your plan?" he asked. I was startled. He had seen right through me. Suddenly, his demeanor softened. He patted my head and told me with a smile that he was just joking. His swift change of face reminded me of the Imperial Prince, who one moment could be sternly reprimanding a soldier, and the next, speaking gently to me. The Imperial Prince instructed them both to get along with me. Yellow hair readily agreed. However, I preferred the stoic red hair, who resembled the Imperial Prince. Suddenly, I felt a poke. Yellow hair said he wanted to take me to their secret base. Since red hair didn't object, I agreed. I soon discovered it was a treehouse. Red hair reached out a hand to help me up. Yellow hair looked back with a grin, and a golden magic circle appeared out of thin air. I was stunned by this display. He then transported us both to the treehouse. I suspected his teleportation skills were rather subpar. They both seemed used to it, however. Yellow hair first apologized, then explained that he needed to ask me a favor. He mentioned my experience making medicine for the Imperial Prince. Red hair added that they hoped I would agree. They wanted me to treat their grandfather, who I suspected was the Emperor. They then spoke of wanting to make a deal. Suddenly, yellow hair gave a sly smile. He listed my enemies, pointing out that I was currently alone and vulnerable. If I agreed, they would protect me. I lowered my head and thought, as long as I can cure grandfather, my position will also rise. Just then, a hand rested on my head. Red hair comforted me. Even if it doesn't go well, it's all right. Then he added, boasting, yellow hair could fight 10 men. He told me even if I didn't agree, they wouldn't let me be bullied. He was so sincere, how could I bear to refuse them? I also learned that grandfather not only suffered from dizziness, but also had red spots appearing on his body, and he had no appetite. I pondered for a moment. I recalled seeing pollen allergy symptoms on television in my past life. But how could I treat him? They planned to bribe the emperor's secretary and then find an opportunity to treat him during the celebration a month later. This also made me think of my system quest to heal those more than 20,000 people. That is to say, I needed to prepare the ointment within a month. But would they let me treat the poor for free? I was only 4 years old, yet burdened with the task of treating the emperor. At the same time, the system also required me to heal a specific 23,983 people. Not only did I need to make the medicine, but I also needed to find the source of the illness in the vast sea of people. Otherwise, my life would be in danger. At this point, I confirmed through my brothers that the celebration a month later would be my opportunity. Suddenly, Red Hair called out to me. He had noticed something was amiss. I could only laugh it off with him, but the thought of me, a 4-year-old, having to treat the emperor in public, it made me feel frantic. Suddenly, he changed the subject, asking if I truly desired nothing. He then told me he thought I would refuse. Finally, he told me again to tell him if there was anything I wanted. He listened with a kind expression, but there was only one thing I truly wanted. After leaving, I started preparing the medicine. The old woman told me the kitchen staff had drunk the rest of the sour plum soup I made earlier. However, they had to taste things every day, so their stomachs were often upset, but I was happy to be able to help them. Then, I took the oil jar and prepared to go to the backyard to make the ointment, because one essential ingredient was the small yellow flower in the garden. It was also at this moment that I first learned that the traditional art of face changing was a skill everyone in the prince's household possessed. The old man surprisingly picked a lot of the flowers for me. Soon, more servants joined the picking team. But then, the old man, who was smiling just a moment ago, suddenly erupted, berating them for not doing their jobs properly. The other servants expressed their dissatisfaction because they genuinely liked me. We quickly finished picking the flowers. I also learned that they weren't just doing it for me, but also because the imperial prince treated them with respect. Then I felt even more obligated to live up to their expectations and work hard on making the ointment. After a series of steps, it was mostly finished. It just needed to sit for a month. At this point, I told Xia that using her name, Shami, for the ointment was actually for her. She was stunned at first, then let out a loud cry that echoed through the woods. She burst into tears of gratitude, declaring she would go through fire and water for me. Then she rushed forward and hugged me. That hug was strong, so tight I almost suffocated. Elsewhere, the Imperial Prince and the others were still preparing my adoption party. Everyone in this world was a master of face changing. My brother was scolding me 1 second, but with just a little bit of acting cute for me. His expression changed instantly. Just a while ago, I was making the ointment. Now Xia, the maid, asked me why I didn't just use the magic from last time to finish the medicine instantly. When he asked me about it, I could only awkwardly tell him I didn't know either. To my surprise, he readily accepted this answer. Grandmother then spoke about me making medicine, which reminded him of his childhood. Back then, the temple forbade commoners from making medicine. Anyone who made medicine, like me, would be called a witch. He then picked up a flower crown and placed it on my head. He comforted me, saying that since people didn't know medicine anymore, I wouldn't be called a witch now. The Imperial Prince then appeared, holding a heart-shaped gift box. Sophie, naturally, had been waiting expectantly. My 2 older brothers also arrived. Yellow Hair, the 6th brother, showed a significant change in his attitude towards me. With a snap of his fingers, a mountain of gifts tumbled from a magical formation. Among the heap of presents for everyone, some were specifically intended to flatter the Imperial Prince. The Imperial Prince waved his hand, and another formation appeared, launching fireworks that blossomed in the air. Grandmother told me this was the signal that everything was ready. Arriving at the party, I found it exquisitely arranged. There was even a gigantic 9-tiered cake. The 2 brothers, Red Hair and Yellow Hair, seemed delighted to see me. They complimented my flower crown, and Yellow Hair, the eldest, took my hand and softly asked if I had made one for him. Of course, I had to give one to my father first. After he put it on, Red Hair became even more agitated. When I offered flower crowns to both of my brothers, Yellow Hair, with an affectionate look, asked me to put on him. Seeing this, Red Hair initially refused, declaring he wouldn't wear such a thing. I coaxed him, saying he'd be a good brother if he wore it. He looked flustered. A little shyly, he said he didn't want to wear something so delicate. I felt embarrassed, but when Yellow Hair started to tease him, Red Hair snatched the crown. I told him that if he took it, he had to wear it. Despite his protests, he obediently put it on. Yellow Hair insisted he looked better. The 2 of them then began bickering in front of me. Suddenly, my father scooped me up in his arms. He told me the adoption procedures were complete. The prestigious Imperial Prince then took me to see his treasure. It was a large tree. Just moments ago, at my adoption party, I had felt the warmth of family, but something still felt missing. I asked my brothers where our mother was. I noticed their expressions change. Just as I began to fear the worst, they told me, with mischievous grins, that my parents were simply divorced. Yellow Hair explained that their mother wasn't suited to palace life and offered me a cherry he'd just picked. I learned that my mother was the headmistress of Yinsha Academy when my 2 brothers attended school. This suggested she was a highly intelligent woman. I longed to meet her. Yellow Hair suggested that if our mother knew I had been adopted, she might reconcile with our father. Suddenly, Father asked Red Hair, whose name I now knew was Gil, why he hadn't brought home his report card. My brother visibly flinched. Yellow Hair snickered. The Imperial Prince then told Gil to put his report card on his desk tomorrow. Father then encouraged me to choose a gift to open. As soon as I picked one, a message popped up about the gift. It also informed me that I could purchase it again after using it, clearly hinting that I should open more. The next message was just as I expected. I received an item that allowed me to choose any point in time to be reborn. This made me practically invincible. However, not only was the entrance fee to the marketplace exorbitant, but the treasure chests within were outrageously expensive. I decided to wait until the following month after receiving my quest rewards before visiting the marketplace. Seeing me lost in thought, Father scooped me up, promising to show me a wondrous sight. He led me to 2 grand trees, explaining that they were named Ide and Gil, respectively. He told me that everyone in the family plants a tree named after themselves, and that he'd brought me here to plant mine. Although he could have easily used magic, the Imperial Prince chose to do it himself, a gesture that touched me deeply. Just then, my brothers, along with Sophia and the others, called out to me. Surrounded by such warmth, the thought of leaving them was unbearable. Meanwhile, in the palace, a plate shattered against the floor. A maid knelt, trembling, beside the culprit, the volatile Alexandra. How dare he react this way? Just because I had a little scuffle with that imbecile. She fumed, confined to my quarters by that cold-hearted prince. That warmongering. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call him utterly vicious. I am Alexandra, the imperial princess, revered by all, a strong contender for the next emperor. How could I possibly let them get away with this? And while I'm confined, I hear that Brute has adopted that simpleton as his daughter. In a fit of rage, she'd struck a servant, drawing blood. Little did she know, the next day, the maids dared to gossip about her openly in the hallway. Jessica, the maid whose head she'd wounded, watched her nervously. Alexandra reveled in their fear. How many gifts did that idiot, Princess Teresa, receive at the party? She demanded. The maid dared to dream of escaping with Teresa. When Jessica remained silent, Alexandra unleashed a torrent of insults. You're nothing but the daughter of a country baron. Serving me here is the greatest honor you'll ever know. Jessica looked as if she might cry. Just as Alexandra was about to explode again, a voice cut through the air. She received over 3,000, I believe. He had an innocent face, but his voice held a chilling undertone. The moment their eyes met, Jessica flinched and turned away, seemingly terrified of the boy after a single glance. Alexandra hadn't even heard him approach. His shadow seemed to flicker and dance with the candlelight. He continued, his voice deceptively gentle. Even the jewel you desired most was given to Teresa. He stepped closer, adding, rumor has it, Teresa's father is the dragon ancestor. Resentment churned inside Alexandra. Teresa had once been nothing more than a fool she could torment at will. Suddenly, a hand rested on her shoulder. He whispered in her ear, Teresa is illegally concocting medicines. Then he added, the Pope has just passed away. The new Pope will be arriving at the palace soon. Alexandra instantly saw her opportunity. By exposing Teresa publicly, she could ruin her. And that ruthless prince, who had adopted such a fool, would be dragged down with her. It served them right. Contact Jebediah, she commanded. It's time to put my plan into action. Teresa's coronation is doomed. In this world, only you can see your own familiar, but I can see everyone else's. My father told me it's a power granted only to those with the strength of a half-dragon. I was tested and found to have no magic, but my father wasn't surprised at all. He said, I'm the reincarnation of a holy dragon. He's so calm only because his two sons, at just 12 years old, can summon historical beasts. He promised to let my brothers summon their historical beasts for me to see. She was currently clinging to her brother Gil's leg, whining. He refused to summon his historical beast, despite her pleas. I have to go train, he told her, pulling away. She was so persistent because she feared his historical beast might be that wretched rabbit. But it's more likely that the rabbit is the emperor's historical beast, seeing that he's already begun his practice and is completely absorbed in it. I had no choice but to give up. My medicine is probably finished at this point, so I asked someone to take me to the kitchen. Xiao was very happy to see me. The ointment was already simmering, the toxins being drawn out. I peered into the pot to check. Just one deep sniff, and I could detect a faint floral fragrance. Now just add a few more crystals, and the ointment is complete. Suddenly, a system window popped up in front of me. Unsurprisingly, it was another promotional advertisement. It was blatantly trying to swindle me out of my money again. It even dared to compare me to a beggar. But watching the time tick away, I still clicked confirm. In an instant, the system interface transformed into a beam of light and vanished. Then it surged directly into my eyes. After checking repeatedly, there didn't seem to be any effect. Had I been tricked? This world is so strange. Commoners can't obtain medicine, but to complete the system quest, I have to make the medicine myself. With the medicine simmered to perfection, only the final step remained, solidifying it with magic. I thought a mage would be called to help me, but unexpectedly, Father came himself, and the moment he arrived, he scooped me up in his arms. I assumed he was free, which was why he came personally. Then I noticed the crowd outside the door, waiting for the Imperial Prince to attend to official business. They all looked exhausted. Father said it was so I could see him more often, but I think Father looks most handsome in his study. Hearing me say this, he decided to go back to work. The staff outside were amazed that a single sentence from me could send the Imperial Prince back to his duties. They erupted in murmurs of admiration. But with a single glance from the Imperial Prince, they fell instantly silent. Still, father dismissed them first. He decided to spend a little time with me before returning to work. Looking at the ointment I'd made, he actually asked if I'd made any for him. But he's so powerful. Why would he need it? To avoid any awkwardness, I said, that his was in a nicer box. He seemed genuinely delighted. As magic flowed from his hands, the ointment solidified. I took out one of the boxes and gave it to Xia. The system panel appeared, telling me I'd completed the quest. It also rewarded me with 100 million gold coins. I instantly felt like a wealthy woman. I decided to open the 50 million gold coin random treasure chest. I called out, but nothing happened. Apparently, it could only be opened in the Dragon Clan commercial street. Just then, father said goodbye, telling me I could ask him for anything at all. I hurried over and grabbed him, looking at him earnestly as I told him I wanted to learn how to use magic. He explained that my dragon heart would allow me to use magic, but only through magic circles. He then ruffled my hair and told me I could go to my brother's to learn. When I went to find my brother, he brought me to a palace. My father is completely doting, and my two brothers are utterly smitten with their little sister. Just now, my brother, whom I hadn't seen in a while, brought me inside the palace. I thanked the attendants for taking care of him, and I shared the ointment I'd made with them. The beautifully packaged ointment had them excitedly chattering amongst themselves. I decided to completely win them over. "Please take care of me," I said sweetly. One of them even started crying, exclaiming that I was infinitely better than ID. Then they expressed their hope that I would visit often. A voice rang out. Their faces instantly paled. It was, of course, my brother ID. Several people apologized to him. I, however, threw myself into my brother's arms. He immediately softened. I looked at him expectantly, hoping he'd teach me magic. When my brother invited me inside, the others were stunned. Once we were in his office, my red-haired brother, Gil, left to get some sleep. I took out the necklace father had given me to give to him. He examined it for a moment, then put it around my neck. He said I needed it more than he did. ID knew right away that father had intended it for me. What I didn't know was that it was the only magic horn in existence, and father could use it to ensure my safety. He then boasted that I was his adorable daughter. This made everyone in the meeting quite uncomfortable. An attendant asked why, if he was so worried about me, he hadn't come along. Unexpectedly, the Imperial Prince admitted it was because I had told him he looked his most handsome while working. This made the other staff members groan inwardly. Several people whispered about my father, seemingly gossiping. Just then, the Imperial Prince's expression turned serious. He noticed someone pretending to faint, trying to get my attention. They didn't recognize this person, but looking at his features, they felt a flicker of unease. He belonged to a race that was supposed to be extinct. I was still oblivious to the danger lurking nearby. In this world, all it took was a snap of the fingers to create a smokescreen. So I sought out my brother, hoping to learn magic. But due to my constitution, I could only learn magic arrays. He then picked up a sheet with an array on it. The paper shimmered with golden light and vanished into thin air. Then a golden light burst outwards. He then put on a wise expression and told me to remember that magic is a discipline. I had to admit, he looked quite dashing. I threw my arms around him. He spoiled the moment by saying that I hug anyone and everyone. If I could have beaten him, I would have smacked him upside the head. I denied his accusation, then noticed my goofy brother, who seemed to have fallen asleep reading. I felt bad waking him. So I said goodbye to ID and went out to play for a bit. As the door clicked shut behind me, he picked up his book. Stretching, he grumbled to ID that Chick hugs whoever she wants. ID explained that he was worried about my naivety and that I might be taken advantage of. Why was I being called Chick, though? He then handed my goofy brother a letter. It said death to the Emperor. My goofy brother didn't think much of it, but ID analyzed the hidden implications. He explained that if I became the new Pope's wife, his chances of claiming the throne would greatly increase. He wasn't willing to force me into anything, however, but the Pope was bound to marry an imperial princess. The two of them resolved to protect Kifa. Suddenly, Goofy Gil asked what the new Pope looked like. ID only knew he had black hair and a beard. Then Gil suddenly said, "Then that person in front of Teresa isn't the Pope." He knew what was happening around me, because he possessed eyes that could see through anything. He was about to jump out the window to come protect me. The wicked imperial princess's subordinate was actually the son of a former demon king. As the target of Alexandra's hatred, I was completely unaware. I even had a secret crush on them both. I was walking through the forest when I heard what sounded like someone in pain. I went to investigate and found a silver-haired boy sitting against a tree. His face was filled with concern. His handsomeness truly captivated me for a moment. However, I quickly realized he needed to catch his breath. I hurried forward to check on him. Taking out the paper that had held the ointment, I used the lingering fragrance to help him recover. I anxiously asked if he was feeling better. His complexion improved, and he expressed his gratitude. Suddenly, he took my hands in his, gazing at me intently, and asked if I was Kifa. Then, he introduced himself, saying his name was Pavel. I thought the name suited him perfectly. His handsomeness held a touch of endearing charm. Noticing his unwavering gaze, I asked, a little embarrassed, "What is it?" He then told me there was a bug in my hair. I was instantly startled, my face flushing. My shriek echoed through the garden. As I panicked, he helped me remove it. I thanked him with a playful pout. Suddenly, I felt myself lifted into the air. My goofy older brother, Gil, had scooped me up. He demanded to know if Pavel had fainted on purpose to attract my attention. Worried he might faint again, I quickly asked how he was feeling now. As Pavel reassured him he was fine, my brother flew into a rage and carried me away. Pavel called out, saying he hoped to see me again. Gil, however, abruptly turned back and gave him a subtle warning. Watching us leave, Pavel smiled. He seemed strangely pleased. Suddenly, his expression changed. He wished he could whisk me away right then. But, given Alexandra's lack of understanding, he couldn't. He was originally a demon, serving Alexandra for some unknown reason. He casually folded a paper airplane to follow me, allowing him to keep track of my movements. Simply because I was teased by a Yao girl, my romantic encounters have been coming one after another. First, I met a silver-haired puppy. Then, I encountered this black-haired boy. Before this, I had arrived at the Dragon Clan commercial street. Just as I was marveling at the novelty of it all, I suddenly heard the call of win a grand prize for just 100 yuan. It was, of course, a gashapon machine. The most valuable prize inside was a Dragon Clan scepter. Even though I knew it was a trap, I still wanted to try once. After all, I'm a lucky person. Confidently, I gave a spin. It turned out I was indeed overconfident. Tearfully scammed, I decided it was best to activate the treasure chest I received. Following the system prompt, I confirmed the purchase. My other reason for coming here was the rebirth dart. I knocked on a shop door. Inside was a red-haired girl with horns. She expressed surprise that I was human. Knowing the Dragon Clan valued etiquette, I politely greeted her. I excused myself, saying I was shopping for a gift for my grandfather. This seemed to increase her fondness for me. Casually browsing, I was surprised to discover that the Dragon Clan openly sold medicine. Among them, there was even a special remedy for my grandfather's illness. Just as I was about to inquire about it, she mentioned how much effort she had put into finding these medicines. Realizing I shouldn't reveal my needs too soon, I decided to look for the rebirth dart first. However, I couldn't see the items on the upper shelves. At that moment, she suggested I use magic to float up. She referred to the royal family as evolved humans. After leaning closer to observe me, she noticed my dragon heart. She also seemed to discern the issue with my health. With a gesture towards the empty air, a magic circle appeared beneath my feet, lifting me into the air. I saw the prices of the items above. I was instantly stunned, but then the system interface appeared. It described the item as a dimensional summoning scroll. With that, I could just summon a pharmacy directly. My business would take off instantly. Then I saw a dart, and it was a rebirth dart. Slightly embarrassed, I tried to haggle with him, hoping he'd lower the price. He asked how much of a discount I wanted. Blushing a little, I said, "Could you take off, say, for 1,000? He seemed surprised. Then I promised him more business, assuring him I'd take care of him. My cuteness seemed to work on him. He just gave me the medicine I wanted. I had to try my best not to let my triumphant grin show too much. He must have thought I was unwell. Just as he came over to check on me, the door slammed open with a huge bang. Even cracks appeared on the walls. He angrily threw open the door. A figure seemed to flicker amidst the dust and wind. Then a man with dark, chaotic hair appeared, and from his lips, he uttered my name from before I crossed over. Then he just collapsed. I was completely shocked. While I was shopping, I ran into a deathly pale boy, and he actually called out my name from my previous life. While I was still reeling from the shock, he fainted. I rushed over and cradled him in my arms. He slowly opened his eyes. He called me Cieli. Had I heard wrong before? His hand reached up and touched my cheek. But in an instant, he collapsed again. The Dragon Clan girl beside me wrinkled her nose at the stench coming from him. She said it wasn't just the smell of blood, but the smell of parasites. I was startled. Hearing this, the people around us started murmuring. We were instantly isolated. The system interface popped up again with a new task. The reward was pathetically small, but even without the task, I would have helped him. Looking at the weak boy lying on the ground, I first took out the hemostatic agent I had just bought. Then I prepared to bandage him. The Dragon Clan girl came over to help. She shooed away the onlookers. She said bandaging him would also help dissipate some of the smell. Suddenly, the boy cried out. I comforted him, telling him to bear with it. Looking at him lying there so weak, I was lost in thought. Then I was completely captivated by him. Even the Dragon Clan girl beside me joined me in admiring his handsomeness. We suddenly realized we were focused on the wrong thing, because at that moment, the wounds on his body were multiplying. The Dragon Clan girl seemed to understand what was happening. She explained, he's connected his future self with his present self. Therefore, he needs a divine blessing, or a dragon or fox's blessing. It seems he came here for a dragon's blessing. Suddenly, he looked at me intently. He said, or maybe I came to see you. After I finished tending to his wounds, he suddenly grabbed me and struggled to his feet. He said, I finally found you. Just as I was about to ask what he meant, his face turned pale. He swayed, then collapsed into my arms. So I took him home and hid him in my clothes. Maybe we knew each other before. I would just have to wait until he woke up to ask him. On my first visit to the palace, I received invitations from 2 people. Naturally, I accepted both. The palace decorations were truly magnificent. Compared to my awestruck wonder, my 2 brothers seemed completely unfazed. There were even vases made of pure gold. Then they prepared to take me to the banquet hall. Both of them extended their hands. Seeing me hesitate, ID said softly, don't you want to hold our hands going in? I had barely taken their hands when Gil tried to scare me, saying, be careful, Grandpa might eat you. ID denied it, but then added that someone had once fainted from fright. It's a good thing you brought Shajin today, he said, but I hadn't brought it because I was nervous. After all, the person I was meeting today was Lair, the man who dared to slay a dragon. Now the world only knows his majesty, but I thought he must be lonely. As our names were announced, the 3 of us entered the crowded banquet hall. I was marveling at the grandeur of the imperial banquet when I noticed someone staring at me. Looking closer, I saw it was a chubby boy. He swaggered over and said, hey, but my 2 brothers simply ignored him, leading me past. He called out Gil's name indignantly, but my brother just feigned ignorance. When I played this game before crossing over, Gil was my most played character. But after arriving here, I discovered how mischievous he actually was. He brazenly mocked my father for adopting me. Gil and ID's expressions were quite different. As he became more and more provocative, Gil finally made some close contact with him. The chubby boy went sprawling across the floor. Gil warned him to watch his words. He remained incorrigible. I just thought he was incredibly rude. Thinking further, I voiced my opinion. He then threatened to teach me a lesson. Just as I panicked, ID stepped in front of me. I hadn't expected him to care so much. He warned the chubby boy. ID was skilled with verbal sparring. In just a few words, he left the boy speechless. Then he led me away. I sat between the 2 of them. Looking at the silent ID, I thought he had been incredibly cool. A horn sounded. Gil reminded me to stand. Even the chubby boy stood up with us. The Emperor was entering. Anyone presenting a gift the Emperor disliked would be dragged away. And so I had arrived at this banquet. Amidst everyone's anticipation, the divine Emperor appeared. He emotionlessly instructed everyone to be seated. Taking advantage of this moment, I dared to steal a glance at him. A man whose very presence commanded respect. He looked more like a handsome middle-aged man. My system panel appeared, displaying relevant information. Apparently, he was allergic to peanuts. The most ridiculous thing was that he'd been eating them for 3 years despite the allergy. Then the system issued a quest. At that moment, the Emperor announced the commencement of the gift giving. Under my watchful gaze, the first gift giver, an old man, approached. He presented a 1,000-year-old ginseng root. ID and I immediately recognized it as a fake. Only the clueless Gil was still expressing admiration. The Emperor, with a single glance, waved his hand dismissively. The gift giver was dragged away. One after another, people were swiftly dealt with in the same manner. While people were continuously being dragged away, those who remained and whose gifts were deemed worthy received rewards. Blank checks, no less. I couldn't help but marvel at my grandfather's extravagance. Then I noticed someone cough. It was the chubby boy. He called out to the emperor in an affected manner, "Grandpa." He then put on a display of cuteness before presenting a gift box. The three of us siblings put on quite a show, but grandfather simply said, "Next." Then ID stepped forward and said we had a gift to present. He then told grandfather he wanted to give a different kind of present. That present being his sister, Cieli. I was utterly dumbfounded. Ignoring my embarrassment, they confidently explained that they believed I could solve grandfather's health problem. Grandfather simply said, "Come forward." Despite my reluctance, I went to the front. Things had already come to this, so I had no choice but to give that chubby boy a live demonstration of what a true master of cuteness looked like. I unleashed a triple dose of EGO on grandfather. Just as I began to explain how I could heal him, the system panel suddenly popped up, offering me a huge sum of money to say the emperor's name. How infuriating. The emperor seemed to notice something, and I couldn't help but feel nervous. I had a feeling he saw the pop-up. Just then, I heard murmurs from the crowd. They whispered about my supposed ignorance, calling me an idiot. Gil was furious, but ID held him back. With a wave of his hand, the emperor silenced the crowd. He asked if I could take responsibility for my words. Naturally, I agreed wholeheartedly. He then approached me. At the age of 4, I was being offered as a gift to the emperor by my brothers, tasked with curing his incurable ailment. My brother asked if I knew what the problem was. I blurted out that the emperor was repeating himself every day. Gil was shocked and disbelieving. Seeing his lack of faith, I was speechless. He pinched my cheek, lecturing me about grandfather's reputation. ID, however, had faith in me, simply because he assumed the Dragon Clan had told me. Despite everything, I was thrilled. I had 3 missions. First, distributing an ointment would earn me 100 million. Second, curing the emperor would get me 1,000. And finally, getting the emperor to drink something other than his usual beverage would also net me 100 million. While I was overjoyed, Gil was utterly panicked. Suddenly, I heard that the emperor was having another episode. From inside the room, voices of doubt and disbelief echoed, some even arguing amongst themselves. One even swore on his career. I was indignant. Ignoring my brother's attempts to stop me, I marched towards the room and flung the door open, ready to confront him. My confidence quickly evaporated as I froze. I hadn't expected the emperor to be standing right there before me. He remarked that I needed to come to greet him personally. The 3 of us bowed deeply. But, being the little EGO king that I was, I sweetly explained that I wanted to see grandfather as soon as possible. He sat down arrogantly and gestured for me to begin. I asked my brother to bring me the emperor's meal records. The physician beside me scoffed, asking what was so important about food. I glared at him. Opening the records, I was stunned. From breakfast to afternoon tea to supper, every meal involved peanuts. I deduced that he'd started eating peanuts 3 years ago, and his condition worsened every autumn. The rash on his neck seemed to confirm my suspicions. The arrogant white-haired man was baffled as to how I knew. Naturally, it was because autumn was peanut harvest season. The 2 of them looked bewildered. I explained that peanuts were like poison to grandfather. Grandfather realized that someone might be trying to harm him. He then asked how I came by this knowledge. Embarrassed, I claimed a dragon had told me in a dream. I then explained that the creature with 2 horns was obviously a dragon. Faced with my improvised performance, grandfather seemed to believe me. Then I took out the medicine I had prepared beforehand. He looked at the medicine bottle in his hand. Suddenly, his face turned cold as he asked me how I obtained it. The atmosphere in the hall instantly grew heavy. As expected, this money wasn't going to be easy to earn. It seemed I had to give him a satisfactory answer. I acted indifferently towards the emperor, revered by all. It showed immense subservience to a man who had humiliated me. It was simply because I was the only one who could cure the emperor, and this emperor was giving me a hard time, questioning how I acquired the medicine. I told him that as long as I wished, I could meet a divine dragon in my dreams. I cried to the dragon about grandfather's poor health, and he simply comforted me. But when I woke up, I found medicine left by the dragon beside my bed. Finally, having finished explaining the origin of the medicine, they were speechless. However, I did indeed obtain it from the Dragon Clan. Then, one of them suggested finding someone to test the medicine, but the emperor picked up the cup and drank it all in one gulp. Then I advised him not to drink peanut wine anymore, and I also prepared some medicinal wine for him. He stroked my head, saying, "Just like the drink you made using poisonous fruit?" The fact that the emperor even knew about such a small matter shocked and amazed me. ID then inquired about whether the emperor's condition had improved. Just as he received confirmation, my system panel appeared again. I received 1,000 yuan as a reward. The man who had ridiculed me several times suddenly called out to me. He apologized for his previous disrespectful suspicion. I hastily indicated that it was in the past, and he shouldn't worry about it. After all, facing such a gentle and refined man, how could I bear to blame him? With his self-introduction, I learned that he not only possessed a medical license, but could also study at the temple. I quickly grabbed his hand. After all, I still had to treat that 28,721 yuan debt. Perhaps I would need his help. He said he wanted to learn some medical knowledge from me. Immediately, I showed him the ointment I made. Looking at the shabby wooden box, he looked perplexed. Then, after some rummaging, I finally found the exquisitely packaged version of the ointment. At this time, ID spoke of the hard work I put into making it and expressed his hope that it could be used to treat the common people. Finally, he praised me, saying that I had a bright future. The emperor was also watching me with interest. After acknowledging my talent, he asked how I wished to use the ointment. Naturally, it was to serve the people. I knew my chance to complete the mission had probably come. Then, I suggested distributing it to the common people. I used the excuse that my brother also supported me. Facing Gil's reaction, I simply glared at him, and he quieted down. The emperor also ordered the physician to cooperate with me. With his help, I felt even more confident. My favorable impression of the emperor also greatly increased. However, without seeing their history of longevity, how could I be content to leave? This was a world with a chaotic timeline. I had time traveled here, yet encountered a stranger who could call out my previous name, Cieli. He seemed to be from the future, yet had returned to this place filled with painful memories. In this nation that worshipped the god of love and trust as the chosen one, he was imprisoned in the basement by the temple. The temple forced him to drink the blood of a unicorn, draining his life force, to become a puppet pope. He suffered immensely, only able to eat food that tasted like chewing wax. But in order to change the future and protect Cieli, he endured it all. At this moment, the sound of guards arguing came from outside the door. Their conversation dripped with disdain for him. One of them opened the door, only to be stunned by the sight before him. The boy who had been so timid yesterday stood there today, composed and self-assured, utterly transformed. He began giving orders to the very guard who had bullied him before. The guard, struggling to comprehend this sudden shift, could only watch as the boy turned away with an air of indifference. As long as he could change Cieli's future, he was willing to pay any price to walk through fire. Meanwhile, the maids were chattering with me about the day's events. I, in turn, shamelessly boasted about myself, and the maids quickly became my devoted fans. Picking up a mirror, I saw they had dressed me with particular care. Shamey had even given me bangs. Just then, I heard footsteps. It was Father. I rushed to him, begging for a hug. He lifted me high in the air, his affection evident. I told him about treating Grandfather Emperor. My handsome father carried me to bed, urging me to rest. Before lying down, I told him I thought Grandfather Emperor was lonely. He paused, taken aback. I explained that everything the Emperor truly loved was slowly disappearing. He looked at me tenderly. "You're the second person to say that," he said. "The first was your mother." Hearing him mention mother, I begged him to tell me stories about her, but he gently refused. Unable to resist my pleas, however, he told me that mother had been just as stubborn as I was. A look of regret filled his eyes as he recalled how much she loved riding horses. "I want to learn too," I declared. He straightened my covers, telling me to get some rest. Then he added, "You can have your brother teach you first." The thought of my brother ID's monstrous lion sent a shiver down my spine. Suddenly, Father said my name. He kissed my forehead tenderly, promising to support me in anything I wanted to do. In this world, everyone has a familiar only they can see. While I don't have one, I can see everyone else's. Father's is a talking white cat, while my brother's is a lion. The thought of ID teaching me to ride made me tremble, especially the idea of riding on his beast. Gil, my second brother, asked me with a grin what was wrong. I buried my face in a maid's arms, complaining about my brother's recklessness. "Learning to ride is always like this," Gil retorted indignantly. Seeing I was still upset, he explained that he just wanted me to learn quickly, then hastily apologized. Suddenly, Gil blushed, then, unexpectedly, started acting coy. His sudden shift left me speechless. After his display of affection, he retreated into himself. It felt like my older brother had suddenly become my younger brother. Seeing him like this, I remembered one of my main quests, to help him become emperor. But right now, he seemed completely uninterested in the throne, concerned only with whether I was still angry. Confused, I called him by his full name, asking why he was so good to me. He pinched my cheek, scolding me for my lack of formality. Just then, the quest panel reappeared. I was to repay 10 billion and become the heir to the throne. Hearing my desire to become emperor, Gil suddenly looked worried. I feared he was plotting how to eliminate me as a rival. I squeezed my eyes shut in fear, but then I felt his warm hand on my head, and he began to strategize about how to help me become empress. My gaze fell on Gil's familiar. Cupping his face in my hands, I wished I had one of my own. I suspected I didn't have a familiar because I was a transmigrator. Gil leaned closer. A familiar's soul perishes along with its master, he explained. Hearing this, I wished even more that the cat I saw earlier could become my familiar. Unbeknownst to me, as the maidservant returned home that night, she was stunned by a scene she witnessed on the road. It was my two brothers, ID and Gil, confronting the chubby boy who had bullied me. My brothers wanted the chubby boy to apologize, but he refused. ID, my elder brother, extended his right hand, his body becoming enveloped in a golden flame. Seeing this, the chubby boy fearfully cursed at him, calling him a monster. ID simply smiled nonchalantly. The chubby boy seemed prepared to retaliate, but in the blink of an eye, ID appeared behind him. The chubby boy broke out in a cold sweat, for a triple magic circle had materialized behind him. ID effortlessly subdued him, demanding he never bully anyone again. Pinned to the ground, the chubby boy reluctantly agreed, but ID had recorded the whole encounter, and, grabbing the chubby boy by the hair, made him promise to apologize to me at the palace the next day. Terrified, the chubby boy lay prostrate, unable to move, and could only agree. Having avenged me, my two brothers left, satisfied. One possesses clairvoyance, the other clairaudience. While I may seem unremarkable, my future beloved surpasses them both. Just moments ago, my two brothers had given the chubby boy who bullied me a thorough beating. Seething with resentment, the chubby boy cursed. Why are those two princes so powerful from birth? Just then, a furtive voice caught his attention. The chubby boy looked around, but couldn't locate the source of the voice. A pill rolled silently to his side. The voice said, "Swallow this, and you will gain what you desire, but it will require your soul in exchange." Consumed by hatred, the chubby boy swallowed the pill. Not far away, a silver-haired youth watched the scene unfold, a wicked smile playing on his lips as he imagined what would happen next. Soon, both princes returned to the palace. ID appeared weak, barely able to stand. Gil, his younger brother, supported him, concerned for his well-being. ID knew this was a side effect of using dragon magic. He lowered his eyes, determined to endure. Gil urged him not to push himself and to go rest. ID looked at his thoughtful younger brother with gratitude. After bidding his brother farewell, ID stood alone, his heart filled with ambition to ascend the throne. He gazed at his mother's portrait on the table, convinced that becoming king was also her desire. The people disliked tyrants, so ID had always maintained a facade of kindness. But I, his little sister, had seen through him, and I had always shown more affection towards Gil. The thought stirred a strange feeling within ID. He sat up abruptly, realizing, to his bewilderment, that he felt regret at not having won my favor. He couldn't understand it. Just then, the sounds of Gil and me playing reached him from outside, further troubling him. He snapped his fingers, using magic to block out the noise. This was because he possessed exceptionally acute hearing. Finally, overcome with exhaustion, he closed his eyes. His dreams seemed to drift into memories. As a child, he had killed a dove. His younger brother had felt guilty for not protecting it. Their parents had arrived and witnessed the scene. His mother had comforted him, explaining that it was natural for someone with such extraordinary hearing to find noise overwhelming. But ID had only wanted to silence anything that made a sound, except for his brother. His mother had instructed ID to learn to distinguish between good and evil by imitating Gil's actions. She squeezed ID's shoulder. confident that he would succeed. Their father led Gil closer to them and tell them, as long as they remember to always protect their family, they won't lose control. For ID, protecting his sister is what he wants to do his whole life. After an unknown amount of time, I woke my brother up and asked him to help me choose a dress. A gentle smile played on ID's lips. He silently resolved to protect the carefree me before him. In this world, everyone has a familiar, a pet that only they can see. Although I don't have one, I can see everyone else's. Following the successive appearances of Gil and father's familiars, ID's familiar finally emerged. Today, I had my hair beautifully styled and put on a pretty dress. The maids had dressed me up exquisitely. My adoring maids were captivated by me once again. I asked ID, "Do I look pretty?" ID, however, said coldly, My face fell when I heard he didn't praise me. Then, he gently set down his teacup and told me softly, "Crimson red would suit you better." I realized I had misjudged him. He was even more thoughtful than I imagined. I hopped onto his lap and nuzzled his face affectionately, saying, "Thank you." But ID instantly froze. Called away by the maids to try on more clothes, I jumped off his lap. As I left, I looked back at him with concern. ID remained there, lost in thought, remembering that the day of the giant serpent hunt was fast approaching. He carefully instructed the maids to prepare winter clothes for me. A maid held up a red dress, but I was only concerned about whether the giant serpent was scary. ID smiled and said it was cute, but I remembered it was the final boss in the game. When I played the game before, I lost at that point several times. While I was changing, ID was still reminding me not to wander off. Dressed and ready, I went over to ID and asked him if he wasn't busy today and why he hadn't left yet. Unexpectedly, he said he came just to see how pretty I looked. Then he looked at me teasingly. I felt that ID was in a particularly good mood today, so I asked him what his familiar was. Seeing his hesitation, I gave him my best puppy dog eyes. He put down his book and said he'd show me right away. Fearfully, I covered my head, worried it would be a ferocious beast. He flicked his right wrist, and it was a tiny flying squirrel. I couldn't believe such a cute creature was ID's soul fragment. The little flying squirrel climbed on my shoulder and nuzzled against me. I cradled the little thing lovingly and introduced myself. But the next second, I sneezed, startling the flying squirrel and sending it flying. ID asked if I was all right. I said I was fine. It was probably just the cold weather. He then picked up a shawl and draped it over me. He added meaningfully, "It's a sign that winter is coming." I asked ID why he liked winter the most. He explained that it was because everything was quiet in winter. I told him I preferred spring and summer. He suddenly looked curious. "How did you know I like winter the most?" I realized I let it slip. Seeing me flustered and trying to explain, ID couldn't help but chuckle. Hearing someone approaching, I quickly changed the subject. The maid announced that the chubby boy was here. I didn't know what good deed ID had done. I sat on the sofa and instructed the maids to withdraw. The moment he entered, I sensed something was amiss. The chubby boy, pale and sporting dark circles under his eyes, walked in slowly. A familiar, visible only to its master, can save your life in a critical moment. Just now, after ID had disciplined the chubby boy, my little elephant tossed him a pill. And throughout it all, the elephant remained unseen by anyone else. After recovering, the chubby boy came to find us. ID calmly asked him what he wanted. The chubby boy lowered his head without answering. I looked at him with a touch of fear. Suddenly, the chubby boy began to struggle as if suffocating. I watched carefully. The chubby boy glared, drool dripping from his mouth. I fearfully tugged at my brother's arm. ID, sensing something was wrong, shielded me. The chubby boy seemed to be struck by a sudden headache. Then, he abruptly went berserk, yelling that he was the emperor. To protect me, ID shoved me away, just as I was about to crash heavily to the ground. I squeezed my eyes shut in terror, but I felt no pain. ID's magic, his she, had protected me. Worried about ID, I looked across the room. He and the chubby boy seemed to be locked in a standoff. The chubby boy, looking ferocious, ranted about usurping the throne. ID, however, remained completely composed, enraged by ID's nonchalance. The chubby boy lost control and demolished the room. I was knocked to the floor by the shockwave. The air reeked of sulfuric acid. I looked around frantically for ID. Then a maid rushed in and clutched me tightly. She quickly pulled me away from the danger scene. But then, both she and I were overcome by a mysterious force and collapsed. Someone pounded desperately on the door from outside. I worried that if the door opened, the influx of oxygen would ignite something. The task panel reappeared, alerting me to carbon monoxide poisoning. Was I going to have to restart here again? A snap echoed through the air. Father had arrived. I woke up in Father's arms. He reassured me that everything was all right, but my eyes slowly drifted closed again. On the other side of the castle, the silver-haired youth observed everything that had just transpired with his third eye. Bored, he closed his third eye, his features instantly transforming into those of an innocent young man. Recalling the foolish chubby boy, the youth toyed with a pill, a smug look on his face. It was a pill that amplified greed. However, satisfied with having confirmed ID strength, the silver-haired youth smiled. He remembered my panicked expression from the previous night and chuckled softly. A strange glint entered his eyes. He seemed to have concocted a new scheme to obtain me. Once the most respected princess, now reduced to bullying maids to feel powerful. In a corner of the palace, Princess Alexandra was at it again, tormenting a maid. The silver-haired youth watched silently. Who would have thought that this person before him was once the most revered princess? The youth scoffed, but then the image of his adorable future flashed through his mind. Perhaps even he hadn't realized how indispensable I had become to him. Feigning ignorance, the silver-haired youth questioned Alexandra about the situation. Alexandra accused him of playing dumb. Unfazed, the silver-haired youth calmly asked her if she wanted to attend the evening party. As he spoke, he placed a ribbon in Alexandra's hair. Alexandra, however, angrily threw the ribbon to the ground. The silver-haired youth's smile turned icy. Alexandra was clearly frightened. The silver-haired youth, however, remained impassive. He placed a necklace around her neck and then ordered her to begin vying for the throne. She clearly didn't dare disobey. Alexandra recalled a year ago when she had received a letter from her father with excitement, only to find it contained an order to cooperate with the silver-haired youth. Alexandra hadn't wanted to join forces with him, and she found it strange that they shared the same birthmark. Furthermore, the silver-haired youth often looked at her with pity. Just then, the silver-haired youth anxiously instructed Alexandra to stop bullying the princess. Alexandra, however, wasn't swayed. Secretly, resentment festered within her. The silver-haired youth, meanwhile, revealed another eerie smile. Night fell. A maid walked alone in the palace. Suddenly, a voice startled her. She saw the silver-haired youth standing by the wall, smiling that same unsettling smile. He slowly approached the maid, his eyes holding a demonic glint. He tempted her, urging her to make a pact with him. Panic seized the maid. Suddenly, demonic wings sprouted from the silver-haired youth's back, giving him the appearance of a full-fledged demon. He grasped the maid's wrist with malicious intent. In the empty corridor, only the sinister whisper of the demon could be heard. The silver-haired youth promised her everything she desired, if only she would agree to the contract. The light in the maid's eyes slowly began to fade. It became clear that the silver-haired youth had been casting a spell on her. Soon, the maid's eyes were completely vacant. A smile, utterly different from before, spread across her face. The once proud royal maid willingly became a slave to the demon. All of this stemmed from a drop of blood spilled 18 years ago. A cloaked man had come to seek out the demon lord. This man was the father of the imperial princess, Alexandra. He promised his firstborn to the demon lord. In return, the demon lord was to serve him, thus fulfilling the demon's contract. However, the demon lord's contract had only been half fulfilled. Now, he prepared to make a pact with the maid before him. As his purple, ink-dark magic manifested, he extended a finger. The maid's gaze became fixed and unseeing. On the other side of the palace, the physician reported on my condition. A week, Carl roared in frustration. I had been unconscious for a week, and he was understandably worried about my safety. The physician explained that he had done everything he could. Now, all they could do was wait. Suddenly, ID's voice sounded from behind him. You wouldn't want to end up in a coffin yourself, would you? At these words, the physician's face paled. After all, no servant didn't fear this little demon prince. He nervously chuckled, trying to diffuse the tension. ID stared at him for a moment, seeing right through the physician's facade. He was a man whose heart had been corrupted by greed. The physician could only plead with the prince for mercy, but ID was unmoved. With a flick of his finger, the previously arrogant physician's face contorted in horror. A portrait depicting his most hypocritical moments materialized out of thin air. The physician stammered that he would fetch the Pope to help me. The prince continued to press him. After a barrage of threats, the physician fled in terror. ID's face was etched with remorse. He regretted not protecting me. Despite Carl's attempts to console him, ID only hung his head in shame. Carl looked at me and said that as soon as I woke up, he would teach me to ride a horse. For the first time, the three of them, father and sons, felt utterly helpless. Just then, a servant rushed in. He announced that Sophia had also fallen into a coma. Memories of me flooded the prince's mind. He kissed my hand. Suddenly, his expression darkened. He seemed to be in agonizing pain. Seeing this, Carl and ID panicked. They rushed to his side, their concern evident. The prince waved them away, reassuring them. His primary concern was still my health. In this world, everyone had a pet, visible only to them. But I had 4, and this only happened after I suffered a severe injury. Under a violet-streaked sky, my consciousness awoke on a bed of clouds. As I looked around, I suddenly saw a system panel. To my shock, I only had 2% of my life force remaining. I recalled the chubby boy's emotional outburst, and ID's self-sacrifice. It made me worry about him. Sophia and the others tried to comfort me. Then the system prompted me, asking if I wanted to pay for revival. Otherwise, I would be erased. Faced with this choice, I was speechless. I could only irritably select yes. But after reviving, I'll definitely be the most dazzling person in the world again. Thinking this, my body gradually grew weary and I collapsed. Then I drifted off to sleep. Waking up again, I finally understood the reason behind the chubby boy's actions. It was all because of the Nike magic potion. According to my memories, it was something Gil frequently used later on during assassination missions. I didn't expect to suffer from it so early. Fortunately, I still have my 2 brothers to help me. Suddenly, an image appeared before me. It was the 3 kittens I kept at home. Looking at them, I couldn't help but wonder if they were still alive without my care. At that moment, the system appeared, telling me I could choose one as my familiar. I was stunned. Could these 3 adorable little creatures really protect me? Surely they couldn't just attack people with their cuteness? But I'm so special. They should have some special abilities too, right? But choosing which one was making me incredibly indecisive. Then the system seemed to offer a hint. I followed its direction and found a door. I thought I'd go out first and then choose a familiar, but it said choose before leaving. Then I used the remaining hint. It told me the kitten's ability was cuteness. Thinking about my older brother's familiars, I couldn't help but yell at the system panel. Suddenly, I thought, isn't a kitten's cuteness enough? In a fit of pique, I declared all the kittens to be my familiars. The 3 kittens instantly surged into the space. In a flash, their forms shifted, their colors changed, and they pounced into my arms. Reuniting with them after so long brought tears of joy to my eyes. In the midst of my happiness, I suddenly noticed there were 4 kittens. I froze, staring at the new kitten. After a moment of thought, I was captivated by its cuteness. Then I prepared to leave. With the 4 of them, I felt more confident about facing future hardships. I'd been in mortal danger because of that wicked, chubby boy, but unexpectedly gained several familiars, something others would pay a fortune for. My father and the Pope were watching over me at my bedside. A golden light emanated from the Pope's hands. Suddenly, that incompetent doctor barged in and clumsily patted the Pope. The Pope looked displeased. The doctor awkwardly declared that I was beyond saving. Angrily, the Pope pushed his hand away and tried to throw him out. The doctor's expression was grave. He wanted to keep a close eye on the situation. Just then, a hand grabbed him. The doctor looked up and saw my 2 brothers holding him firmly. Then, the red-haired Gil solemnly thanked the Pope. The black-haired boy confidently declared that I would definitely wake up. Gil's expression brightened. After they left, my father promised the Pope that if he succeeded in waking me, he would give him whatever he desired. Then my father said, as long as it wasn't marrying me off to him, anything was fine. The Pope was taken aback. He had, in fact, considered that possibility. Nervously wringing his hands, he insisted he would definitely succeed. He gently stroked my forehead, and a golden light began to emanate from him. He murmured about having fallen in love with me at first sight. Finally, he began to pray for my safety. My father seemed to have overheard something. His face was grim. The two of them sat there stiffly. The physician reappeared at some point, standing behind the Pope. His hand tightened subtly, a silent threat. "Well, wake her up then," he hissed, his voice laced with menace. Just then, I sat up abruptly, startling them both. I rubbed my eyes. Seeing the handsome young man again filled me with a rush of happiness. "I'm Seleucus," I announced enthusiastically. The Pope's face flushed crimson, and he stammered. "ID." The demon prince scowled. He knew the Pope had been imprisoned in the dungeons, stripped of his magic. Even then, trapped and powerless, the Pope yearned to know Seleucus' name. All of this because, years later, the Pope had become a renowned war hero. After securing a crucial victory, he led his troops in retreat. It was on that retreat that he saw me for the first time, and I in turn noticed him. I approached him. "Your Holiness," I greeted, extending my hand. The Pope froze, then, feigning composure, introduced himself as Heath. As I continued my work, our paths crossed again and again. With each encounter, his feelings for me deepened. That's why he remained by my side. That's why he was so flustered when, upon waking, I reached for his hand. However, my surprise at seeing him there was quickly evident. He seemed to read my thoughts. "Have you chosen your familiar yet?" he asked, a knowing smile playing on his lips.